We begin today the Gemara on Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis, the Mishnah. Zok Teilige Mishnah, HaMoicher Yayin L'Chaveirei. Person that sells wine to his friend, the Hechmitz, and the wine went sour. Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis.
What's Tzadik Zayin?
Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis. The Hechmitz and the wine is vinegar. And the buyer takes the wine and he sees that the wine is vinegar. Eine Chayev B'Achri Yusay. The seller is not responsible for this because it happened in the buyer's possession. The seller can say, I sold you wine and it went bad in your possession. But if it's known that the seller sells wine and his wine is vinegar, meaning it happened already twice or even three times, has to be a chazak, it's something that's established that it already happened a few times, then we know that it's vinegar because the seller is selling not good wine. And then then this is the whole sale is a mistake. He wanted to buy wine and he gets vinegar instead. But the Rishonim say it has to be a case that even though it says here it was known, but it wasn't known to the buyer. The buyer didn't know that this person sells vinegar. He was expecting to get wine. He was told he's getting wine. So in such a case, it's a mekach tos. If the seller tells the buyer, Yayin mevussim ani moichelach, I'm selling you good quality wine, meaning wine that's going to last. Chayev lahamad loy ad atzeres. He has to give him wine that's going to last. Let's say selling him wine in the middle of the winter, or after he presses the wine, after Sukkot, he has to give him wine that's going to last all the way till Shavuos. What the Rashbam says, it doesn't have to last throughout the whole summer. In the summer, when it's very hot, the wine can go sour very quickly, and he doesn't have to give him wine that will last later than that.
But once the wine leaves the seller's possession, really depends on how well stored is from the
Could
buyer.
be, but
if he stores it improperly,
it's gonna
turn.
Okay, so if it's clear that it's a negligence of the buyer, then it's not going to be the seller's responsibility. But if he stored it properly, it has to be wine that lasts until Shavuos. Yoshan. If the seller says, I'm selling you old wine, and he used this expression, Yoshan, that means Mishal Shtakit. He has to give him a wine from the year before, which is better wine, which is aged for a year. If he tells him Miyushan means that it's even older wine, then it's wine that's Mishal Gimel Shanim. That's wine that has to be from 2 years ago, and now it doesn't mean 3 years old, but it means actually a wine from even the season before, from 2 seasons ago, and now it's the third year that he's using this wine, and the wine should last him till the end of this third year. That at the end, when he finishes using it, it'll be 3 years that the wine lasts. Sok to Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, Pshat in the Mishnah, Lo Shanu, the halacha of the Mishnah that it says that the seller is not responsible for the fact that the wine went sour, that it's vinegar, so this wasn't said. Ela b'kankanim de lekeach, when this is the wine which is in the barrels of the buyer. Then it's not the seller's responsibility. Aval b'kankanim de moicher, if the wine goes bad in the barrels of the seller, so then omalei, the buyer can tell the seller, ha chamrach v'ha kankanach. Here, take back your wine, take back your barrels, because it's still in your barrels. So therefore, it's your barrels, your wine that went bad, and therefore it's your responsibility. Why is this the case? Even if it's still in the barrels of the seller, why could the buyer tell the seller, here, it's your responsibility, take back your wine? Why can't the seller tell him, you shouldn't have left the wine for such a long time. I sold you the wine to drink, and you left it, and after a period of time, it became sour, it became vinegar. And says the Gemara, no, we only need this. What Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina explains here in the Mishnah, the case is the Amalei lemikpa, that the buyer told the seller, I'm buying this for cooking. As we learned already before, the Gemara says, when you say that you're buying for cooking, it's clear that you're not buying this wine to drink immediately or over a short period of time. Cooking is when you use it little by little in ingredients that you're going to keep over an extended period of time. So therefore, if the seller gives him wine that went sour and it's in his barrels, so then the seller should have gave him wine that could last for this period of time. The Gemara, why is Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina explaining the Mishnah this way? What's pushing him, the Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina like me, to say Lamasnisan, to explain the Mishnah that in the Mishnah it's talking about the barrels of the lekeach, and therefore the Mishnah says it's not the seller's responsibility. But if it would have been in the barrels of the seller, then it is the seller's responsibility. And the reason is the amalei mikpa, because the buyer said, I'm buying it to use for cooking. Like me, Why doesn't he simply say that the Mishnah is talking about that it's in the barrels of the seller? And the buyer did not say that I'm buying it for cooking. He's buying it for drinking. And then, even if it's in the barrels of the seller, even if it goes sour, it's not going to be the responsibility of the seller because you should have been drinking it right away. Why did he keep it for such a long period of time? So what's pushing him to say the pshat of the Mishnah this way? So Rava answers Masnisin Kashise. It's because he had a question on the Mishnah, the next part of the Mishnah here. The Mishnah says that Im Yedua Sheyene Machmitz. If it's known that this seller's wine goes sour and it becomes vinegar, then Areza Mekach Tos. Then it'll be a Mekach Tos. So the question is, Amai, why is it a Mekach Tos? Leimelei, why doesn't the seller say to the buyer, Lo Yibayalach L'Shuye? You shouldn't have kept your wine for such a long time. Yeah, you kept it for a long time, so it went sour, it became vinegar. If you would have drink the wine right away, then it wouldn't. So therefore, Rabbi Yisrael Bar Chanina understood, you must say that the pshat of the Mishnah is the Amalei Mikpah. It's because the buyer said, I'm buying it for ingredients, for cooking, and therefore the seller should have understood that he needs wine that's going to last him longer. And therefore he explained that the case of the Mishnah is that only if it's in the kalim of the lekeach, then we say that that he can't have any tightness to the seller. But if it's still in the kalim or in the barrel of the meicher, it is going to be the responsibility of the seller because he told him he's buying it for cooking. Shema Mina, that was the raya for Rabbi Yisrael Bar Chanina for what it says in the Mishnah. Okay, but now the Gemara brings another opinion. Pligi that Rav Chia Bar Yosef. Rav Chia Bar Yosef argues on this point that Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina said that if it's in the barrels of the seller and he's buying it for cooking, then it'll be the responsibility of the seller. Rav Chia Bar Yosef said, Chamra, when it comes to wine that you buy, now that you own the wine, it doesn't matter that if it's in the barrels of the seller. You're the owner of the wine. Mazla de Mare got him. The fact that the wine became vinegar, it's the mazel, the bad luck of the buyer, of the owner of the wine now that causes this to happen. So you can't blame the fact that it's still in the barrels of the seller. Shenema, because the pasuk says, "Va'afki ayayim baygid geve yoher v'geimer." The wine is baygid. It what's the word for baygid? No,
Okay.
Yeah. What did you have? It betrays, yeah, very good. It betrays a person which is a balgaiva, which is hori, meaning that it's the gaiva of the owner of the wine that caused the wine to go bad. So therefore, you can't blame the seller, even though it's still in his barrels. In connection to this, the Gemara brings Amar of Mari, Haiman de Yoir, a person which is a balgaiva, afila inchi beisel and bekabel. Even on the people of his own family in his own house, they're not going to listen to him. Shenema, the pasuk says, Geve Yoir v'lo yunove. What does this mean? A person that's a balgaiva lo yinove. Lo yinove means my lo yinove. Benove shaloi. Nove means that keres habayis, his wife, will not accept him and not listen to him. Amar Rabbi Yudah Amar Rav. Another thing about gaiva, Rabbi Yudah said in the name of Rav, kolam izgoa betalis shel talmid chacham. A person that holds himself great with the cloak of a talmid chacham. He's presenting himself as being a talmid chacham, but ve'ein a talmid chacham. But he's not a talmid chacham. He's not allowed to enter into the place, the mechitza of the Eibishter. Because ksiv hacha, here the pasuk says v'lo yinova, that is geve yoir v'lo yinova. What does the v'lo yinova mean? Or ksiv hasam, in the pasuk where it speaks about the Beis Hamikdash, in the Shira it says al nevei kachecha. Nevei kachecha means the building of the Beis Hamikdash. So a person that's a balgaiva will not be allowed to enter the mechitza of the Eibishter in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, the Gemara now goes back to the halacha of selling wine. Omar Rava said, Haiman, the Zavan le Chavita, the Chamra le Chanva, a person that's selling a barrel of wine to a storekeeper, Adaite le Savuye, and he's giving it to him, he's selling it to him, according to the Rashbam's Pshat, he's not really selling it to him. This is a person that makes wine, a winemaker, and he gives the wine to a person in a store that's going to sell the wine for him to people, little by little. He takes the barrel of wine and he sells wine to people. Now, v'takif, the wine went bad over time. Apalge, after he sold half of the barrel of wine, or atilsa, after he sold a third of the barrel of the wine, now the wine went bad. So what happens now? Could the store seller of the wine say to the winemaker, take back your wine as is, it went bad, I did my best to sell, and just take back the wine as is? Or no? Or could the seller say, the storekeeper can't say that. The winemaker says to him, the wine went bad in your possession when you were selling my wine. So I want you to give me back the value of a good quality wine. So dinuhu, the halacha is the mekabel laminei, that the seller has to take back the wine as is. The wine is still in the possession of the winemaker. It's just the store that's selling it is just doing a shlichus for him, selling the wine for him. But it still belongs, it's in the barrels of the winemaker, and it still belongs to the winemaker. So therefore, it's definitely his wine that went bad, and it's not, you give it back to him as is. Now, however, there's different conditions to this. This is only said, Elo de Lishoni bebarza, if the one that's selling the wine did not change the position of where the spout of this barrel is. He kept the wine, the barrel with the wine exactly as is that he got from the winemaker. Avoshani bebarza, he makes a certain change. He changes the place where the spout of the wine is. So then it's going to be a responsibility of the wine seller, because then we could say that because of the change that he made, and he didn't ask permission for this. That's one of the ways Mefarshim explained this, that you were given a shlichus to sell this barrel, this wine as is. Who gave you permission to make a certain change here? So there's a certain geneva here. You're doing something without asking, so that causes it to go bad. It could be it caused it to go bad, but the very fact that you did something which is a geneva, you didn't ask, therefore it's going to be your responsibility. Another thing, and this is only if the day of the marketplace, when people come to buy wine, did not come. So the wine seller, he's trying to sell the wine. He sells half, he sells a third, but he couldn't sell the whole thing until it went bad, because it's not a time when people are coming to buy the wine. But if the winemaker gives this wine seller the wine in a time when it's the day, the marketplace, when people come to buy wine, and what happened? The wine seller did not sell the whole wine, and it went bad. So then we're not going to say that he could give back the wine to the winemaker as is, because then we see that it's really the laziness of the one that was supposed to sell the wine. There's a lot of people here, there's a lot of customers, why didn't you sell the wine? So it's his laziness, and therefore it will be his responsibility that it went bad. Another halacha is similar. Rava said, a person that receives wine from a winemaker, Adaita, and over here he made up with him. So this that the Gemara speaks about is a little bit different than the previous case. It's not just a person that's doing a shlichus, selling the wine for a winemaker, but over here we're talking about a case where you get the wine from the winemaker and you're taking it to a different city to sell there for a profit, and they're going to split the profit. In the Gemara, this is what's usually called an iske. When a person takes someone's produce or someone's product or someone's business and he invests it or he makes a profit for him, and then they divide the profit between them. But now the thing is, the winemaker made up with him and told him, Adaita de mamtile, you should bring this wine, you're going to take this wine and bring it where? The Parvase de Vol Shafet, to the port of a city called Vol Shafet, which is a place where a lot of people come to buy wine. And over there you can sell the wine for a higher price, and you can make a profit. Okay, so now he has to go dafka to that place. That's what he made up with him. But by the time he got there to that port, the price of the wine there dropped, and now he cannot make any profit on the wine, or maybe even there's a loss here. So who is the one that takes the loss here of this wine? Dinahu, so the halacha is the mekabelei, that the winemaker is the one that has to accept the loss of this wine. Why? Even though it was they were supposed to split the profit, and now if there's a loss, so they should split the loss as well. But over here, because it's the winemaker that limited him and told him you should go dafka over there to that place, that far place, and sell it there by that port. So by the time he got there, the price of the wine dropped. It's his fault that it's his responsibility that he told me to go there to this place. And the boy was asked, what happens if this person is taking the wine for the winemaker to this port, and by the time he got there, not that the price of the wine dropped, but the wine went vinegar, it turned sour, it became vinegar. So what's the halacha in such a case? Amalei Rav Hillel Rav Ashi, so Rav Hillel says to Rav Ashi, ki avoy, kavon, that is Bei Rav Kahana. When I was by Rav Kahana, Amalon, he told us, chala loy. In a case where it became vinegar, then it's not going to be the responsibility of the winemaker. Now, the point here is, even though this wine is in the barrels of the winemaker, and according to what Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said before in the Pshat that he said in the Mishnah, that even when you buy wine, but if it's still in the barrels of the winemaker or of the wine seller, and you keep it over a period of time, it doesn't matter. But because it's still in his barrels, it's going to be his responsibility. So over here as well, even when it goes sour, vinegar over a period of time, but it's still in the barrels of the wine seller or the winemaker, that is. But loy, he said no over here, because who's the owner though? Who's the owner of this wine? As I mentioned, this is a iska. They actually are partners now in this wine that they're making a profit in partnership. So therefore, when it goes sour, vinegar, it's not going to be the full responsibility of the winemaker. Over here, they're going to have to share the loss between them because they're both owners of this wine. And the Gemara explains, this is not like Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, but it's according to the opinion of Rav Chiya bar Yosef. Rav Chiya bar Yosef says, we look at who's the owner of the wine, and that's the mazel. The owner is the mazel of the one that caused the loss of the fact that it became vinegar, and therefore the loss, they'll have to split it between them. But the Kedamri, another version here is that Rav Kahana said, Afilu chala, that even if the wine turned vinegar, nami mekabel, the winemaker has to accept that loss. The reason is, even though now the person that's taking the wine from him, he's a partner here, so why should only the winemaker take the loss? The Gemara explains, Kaman, according to who is this? Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. Like Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina said before, that the wine is in his barrel, you can blame the fact that it became vinegar on the fact that it's in his barrel, and therefore even here, the winemaker is the one that takes the loss. The Mishnah said, Yoshan Mishel Eshtaket Cholo. If he says he's giving him old wine, it has to be from Eshtaket from the previous year. And then, so on this we learned, Umiyashem V'Hailech Ad HaChag. This is actually going on the next case of the Mishnah where it says Miyushan, that he's giving him older wine, even from a previous season, so it's from 2 seasons ago. So you're not giving him wine from, when it says in the Mishnah 3 years ago, it doesn't mean you have to give him a wine from 3 seasons ago. What it means is you give him a wine from 2 seasons ago, but the buyer has to be able to use the wine and it should still be in good condition until the end of this season. You can use it until it comes Sukkot, which is the next season when you're going to produce wine, and therefore by the end of when he uses the wine, it's already 3 years or 3 seasons from when the wine was produced. A person is selling a piece of property to his friend. Okay, according to one version, the pshat of this Mishnah is he's selling a piece of property to build a house on it, but it wasn't specified exactly what you're building here. So the Mishnah is going to tell us what's the minimum size of a room that you have to give him to be able to build here. According to the Bach's Girsa, when it says it's connected to the next part of the Mishnah. He even puts it into the Girsa here. We'll see what the Mishnah says here in the next part. A person accepts upon himself a place for his friend, and what does he make up? What's the deal here? What is he going to do for him in this place? He's going to build a house for his son to live there. When a person marries off his son, so he builds him a small room or a house that he should be able to live there. Or based on manas labitoy, or to build a house or a room for a daughter that the husband passed away, and now he wants a room for his daughter to live there. That's what he made up to build for him. So as I said, according to the Bach, the previous case, is also going on this, that you sell a place, a little piece of property for a person to be able to build there a beis chasnos or a beis almanos. So how big does this room have to be that you're building? Baine, the room that you build has to be arba ames al sheish. 4 ames by 6 ames. That's the size. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel says such a size of a room to build for a beis chasnos or a beis almanos for his daughter that the husband passed away, that's too small. Refes bakerhi. This is like the size of a barn. It's not considered to be the size of a room for a couple to live in. So therefore it has to be bigger. It doesn't say here in the Mishnah the size, Rabbi Shmuel doesn't say what it is, but this size of 4 by 6 ames is too small. Now, a person that wants to make a refes bakar barn and he hires someone to build him a place, a barn, so how big does it have to be? Baine dal damis al sheish. It has to be 4 by 6 ames. The same size that we just said before, so it has to be this size. Bayis katan, if you're building for someone a small house. What means small? Sheish al ches. It should be 6 by 8 ames. Gadol, if you're building for someone a large house, ches al eser. It should be 8 ames by 10 ames. Traklin, if you're building a traklin, as we'll see, this is like a big pavilion. The Gemara is going to explain what this is. Yod al yod. It should be 10 by 10 ames wide. Now, what's the height of the how high is the ceiling in this in these houses? Rumai, the height is kechatzi orkai kechatzi rachpai. When you put together the length and the width, and then you divide that in half, that's the height. So, for example, you have over here the small house, which is 6 by 8. So that's 14. So you divide that by half, 7. That's the height of the ceiling. Now, Raya L'Davar, a proof of this, that when you look at the height of a house, the ceiling, so you take the length and the width, and then the half of that is the height. So Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Kibinyan HaHeichel. It's like the binyan of the Heichel, the Beis HaMikdash. So the length of the Beis HaMikdash was 40, the width was 20, together it's 60. You divide that by half, it's 30. That was the height of the ceiling of the Beis HaMikdash, 30 amas. So we see that the height of the ceiling is half of the length and the width. Talk to Gemara. When the Mishnah here speaks about the fact that a person wants to build for his son and for his daughter, what does it say? Why does it say Beis Chasnos lebenoi? That he's building a place for his son to live in when he's marrying off his son, and Beis Almanos lebitoi. And then it says if it's his daughter, therefore her husband passed away, he's building a house for the almana for his daughter. Why does it separate the two? Listen, why wouldn't it say Beis Chasnos, that he's building a place to live, libnai ulebitoi, for his son or his daughter that he's marrying off? Or a Beis Almanos, he's building a house for an almanos, for either libnai, because his wife passed away, or libitoi, or for his daughter that the husband passed away. Why is it saying that the house that you build for is dafka for the son that's getting married, and the house that you build for the daughter is when the husband passed away? That is the Gemara, Milsa Agav Orche Kamashmalan. The Mishnah here, by saying this, is teaching us another point, that the loy darke, or the lav darke, the chasna, it's not the right thing, it's not the derech for a son-in-law, lemedar bei chamua, to live by his in-laws, to live together with the father-in-law. And therefore, it's the father that builds a house for his son, and then and so what happens is, if the husband passes away because the daughter was living by her in-laws, so then her father now is going to have to build her a Beis Almanos by his place. And the reason for this is because we don't want a son-in-law to live by his in-laws, because there could be an inappropriate relationship between the son-in-law and the mother-in-law. And therefore the Mishnah is telling you the derech, that the father builds a house for his son to live near him, and then if the husband passes away, she's going to have to move back and live by a place near her father, and therefore then he builds a Beis Almanos for his daughter. Now, the Gemara brings there that what it says, that Kedichsiv b'Sefer ben Sira. This is based on also what it says in the Sefer ben Sira. Ben Sira was an individual, I think his name was Shimon ben Sira, that was in the time, I think, in the end of the first Beis HaMikdash, and he wrote a Sefer that was not part of Nevi'im. The Gemara in Sanhedrin says that it's a Sefer that has in it also Divrei Chulin. It's not, some of it is Dvarim B'Teilim, but it has in it certain things that the Gemara quotes different times. So here the Gemara quotes what it says in Sefer ben Sira. Hakel shakalti b'kaf meiznayim. He says, everything I weighed on a scale, and I didn't find anything that's cheaper, lighter than the subin, than the peels, the chaff from the kernels of wheat. And the kalmi subin, what's lighter? Or in other words, here what he means to say is what's lower and what's worse and than this, chasan adar bebeis chamav, a son-in-law that's living by the house of his in-laws. As I mentioned, it's not the right thing for a son-in-law to live by the house of the in-laws because of inappropriate relationship that could be with the mother-in-law. And v'kal mechasan, and what's even worse behavior than that is oirach machnes oirach, a guest that is a guest in someone's house, and he invites and brings in another guest here. And v'kal, and what's even less and worse than this is me'oirach, is Meishiv Dava B'Terem Yishma, a person that answers before he hears the question that's asked of him. Shanem, as the pasuk says, Meishiv Dava B'Terem Yishma, a person that answers before he hears what is being asked of him. Ivelas Iloi, it's an ivelas, it's a wrongdoing on his behalf, meaning this shows a gaiva. When someone is saying something to you and you're not ready to hear him out until the end, so you show like, I understand everything, I don't have to listen to you. So that's a gaiva, that's the ivelas. And also a klima, it's an embarrassment. You end up embarrassing yourself because you answer things that don't make sense because you didn't hear out the other person that he says something to you until the end. Going back to the Mishnah said that Rabbi Shmuel says that to build a house, a Beis Chasnos, and the size that Rabbi Akiva said, 4x6 is too small. That's the size of a barn. And then after that, the Mishnah actually said, if you want to build a barn, so what's the shear? It said the same shear, 4x6. So now the Gemara here is going to explain, when it says in the Mishnah the shear of the size of a barn, who was saying that? Was that Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva? Refes boker man ketanilo. When it says the size of the barn, who's saying this? So the Gemara says there's two opinions. Ikeda, some say Rabbi Shmuel ketanilo. Rabbi Shmuel is the one that's saying this. Right? So in other words, Rabbi Shmuel, since he's the one that said before that the size of a barn is 4 by 6, so then afterwards, when the Mishnah says this size for the barn, it's taka the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel. But according to Rabbi Kiva, the size of a barn would be smaller. But others say Rabbi Kiva ketanilo. Rabbi Kiva is saying it. Rabbi Kiva also agrees and holds that the size of a barn is 4 by 6. True, Rabbi Kiva also holds that when you build a little house, a little room for a couple to live in, that house can be built with the same size, but he also holds that the size of a barn is that size. So Rabbi Kiva is saying this. And this is what Rabbi Kiva is saying. Even though this is the size of a barn, there is sometimes that a person makes the size of a house, of a room for a couple to live in the same size of a barn. And the other opinion is, as we said before, Rabbi Shmuel ketanilo, that the size of the barn that it says here, this is Rabbi Shmuel speaking, and this is what Rabbi Shmuel is saying. Rabbi Shmuel is continuing from his opinion. He says, if you want to build a barn, then it has to be 4 by 6 amas. But then if you want to build a house for a son-in-law, or for a son that is, or for a daughter, then it has to be larger than 4 by 6. Traklin, the Mishnah says, if you're building a traklin, yud al yud, the traklin has to be 10 by 10 amas. What is the traklin? My traklin, says the Gemara, the traklin we're talking about over here is kufsa bei vardi. This is a pavilion that's built with like sort of open walls or a lot of windows in it, and it's built amongst flowers, amongst roses. It's a place that you sit, it's sort of semi-outdoors with a lot of roses around it, and in a garden, and that's built with this size of 10 by 10. Tani and Abraisa, we learned another kind of place that's built that wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah, the kanter. If you have a place that you're making a kanter, Shtei Mesra it is al yud beis. Has to be 12 by 12 amas. Now, what is this kanter? My kanter, tarbetz apadni. This is a garden that's built in front of a big palace, and so they make a beautiful area of a garden, and that area, that garden, has to be 12 by 12 amas. Then the Mishnah said, Rumai, the height to the ceiling, how tall does it have to be? Has to be, take the length and the width of the house and divide it by half, that's the height. And then the Mishnah said, a proof of this, Rav Shimon Gamliel says, you can learn it from the binyan of the Beis HaMikdash. Now the Gemara asks, when the Mishnah here says, man ketanilo, who's the one that's saying this? Now, obviously, you would learn the Mishnah, it looks like Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying it. It says in the Mishnah, Rav Shimon Gamliel. But the reason the Gemara is asking the question is because the lashon of the Mishnah is not usual. Usually you would say, Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Ra'ya l'davar. That's the lashon. Here though, the Mishnah says, Ra'ya l'davar, and then it says, Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer. Why does the Mishnah say it in that order? So therefore the Gemara says two pshatim. One pshat is that the Ra'ya l'davar, one second, where am I over here? Ikkeda Amar, there are those that say, Rav Shimon Gamliel ketanilo. Like the simple pshat of the Mishnah, it's Rav Shimon Gamliel saying this. And this is what he was saying. What's a proof for this, that the height has to be half of the width and the length? We learn it out from the way it is with the binyan of a heichel. But Amar, there are others that say that the pshat, the way you have to read the Mishnah is different. Tanakama ketanilo. First, the Mishnah says, Raya l'davar, that was the Tanakama speaking. The Tanakama wanted to bring a Raya to this, and where would he bring the Raya to this? From the binyan of the Beis HaMikdash. And Rav Shimon Gamliel understood what the Raya was that he wanted to bring, and then Rav Shimon Gamliel jumped in. Rav Shimon Gamliel is actually asking and he's wondering on this comparison. And this is what he's saying to the Tanakama. Raya minayin, where are you bringing of proof for your opinion that the height has to be half of the width and the length? Mi binyan heichel, from the binyan of the Beis HaMikdash. Atu kula alma ki binyan heichel avdi. Does everybody build the height of a house that the ceiling is as tall as it is in the Beis HaMikdash? How can you bring a raya from the heichel of the Beis HaMikdash?
The proportions from the Beis HaMikdash.
Yeah, but even this itself, the proportions to say that a person that builds a house that you take the width and the length, and then you combine that, and then you divide that in half, and that's the height of the ceiling. It could be a very tall ceiling. So not everybody builds a house in such a way, like the binyan of the Heichel. The Rashbam says this is also the reason, according to this pshat, why the Mishnah says ki binyan ha'Eichel. And Rab Shimon Gamliel is saying, could you compare ki binyan? Are you saying that everybody builds like the binyan of the Heichel? Tanya and Abraisa we learned Acherem Maimrim, the opinion of Acherem Rumai. What's the height of the ceiling? That if you so this is all relevant for if you're going to build for someone. How tall do you have to build? It's as high as the beams that go across the house, then the width of the house. So according to this opinion, it goes according to the width, like the beams that are put across in the width of the house. In fact, the Gemara Veleme, so why doesn't he just say clearly Rumai Karachbai, that the height, the ceiling is like the width of the house? Why does he have to say the beam? So the Gemara gives two pshatim. Either the pshat is beise me'iloi rovach, a house, the way they built, at least in those times, the wall, it got thinner as it went higher up. The walls in the bottom were thicker, so it should stand firm, and then higher up it was thinner. So therefore the width of the house on the top is actually a little bit wider than the bottom. Therefore he's talking about the beams that are on the top. If you buy same, another opinion here is mishum de'ike be'kavi, because the beams are wider than the house, because in order for the beams to hold up the house, hold up the roof, so you have to place the beams into these indentations inside the walls of the house. So if the beams are actually a little bit wider than the house itself, and therefore when he talks about the height of the ceiling, he's saying specifically the beams, which is a bit wider than the house itself. Okay, the Gemara here is going to get into a big discussion when we get to the Beis HaMikdash, the Kruvim in the Beis HaMikdash. We'll see you tomorrow.